Welcome to the Outhouse Lounge, where we relax and talk about stuff. A while back, we talked with a group of excellent ladies of rock and about what they went through to become successful and get the audience as well as the media that they deserve. With me now is someone who was there in the very beginning when it came to women in music. Patti Quatro Ericson, who along with her equally cool sisters formed the Pleasure Seekers and Cradle. Patti was also with Fanny, all influential, all-female groups, which inspired and opened the business for so many other great acts. Welcome to the Outhouse Lounge, Patti Quatro Ericson.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And I want to get into this right now because the Pleasure Seekers and Cradle were around. You formed them in the mid-'60s. And in the late 60s as well, when there weren't a lot of I don't think there were any all female bands. I guess they were just starting. You had, I believe it was Fanny, Bertha, you guys, and there were some female fronted bands. I can imagine it must be a little tough to kind of break ground in that respect, right?
Yes, it was tough. There were actually, it's funny because there were a lot more female groups around than anybody knew about because it was such a novelty. But you mentioned a couple, Bertha, in the U.S. We had about 3 or 4 of them in Detroit. And we used to trade lineups. I'd grab somebody from one lineup, when we needed a musician. And same in Europe. There were like 3 or 4 different girl bands. So it was a novelty, yes, because nobody was accepting females playing back then. And us in Genya, we were the first ones in 1964. I mean, Susie was 14, I was 16, and we had our first labels and, had a product out, which nobody else had. So that was pretty early.
So when did you guys start actually playing together as sisters?
Well, we when my brother was on Lawrence Welk when I was 12, and it sort of affected us. We looked at my brother in a box, national TV star on that show, and it sort of affected us. And then in 1964, I saw the Beatles, and everyone around me was crying and, oh my God. And I was sitting there focused on the Beatles, and I thought, I'm going to go home and start a band. I want to do that, a girl band. And I went home and called my 2 best friends. And we started it. And then we dragged in the 2 younger sisters, Susie and Mary Lou, to round it out. And that's when we started. I had been playing some folk guitar. And the drummer, she had been taking some lessons just for fun, And it turned into us getting serious about it right then at 1964.
And of course, Nancy joined you later on, and she became the lead singer for Cradle, which was the second incarnation. We can talk about all of that straight ahead, but it was kind of an interesting transition too, because it was a different band.
Completely different. We started writing in earnest. In those days, we were on Mercury, and they wanted to have their staff writers write the songs. So our first singles were Carol Bayer Sager. I'm sure you know that name. She's had a billion hits through her legacy. And she wrote one of the tunes, and another staff writer. They didn't really want a girl band trying to write their own singles. So in Cradle, we went heavily into writing. Times were changing, even in Detroit. So there we went off into a different thing and started writing in earnest, even though we wrote a few things in Pleasure Seekers also. I had Nancy Quatro on several times, a couple times in the lounge here. And of course, in past incarnations, we've interviewed your sister, Susie Quatro. Right.
But I understand your family was music oriented from the start. Your parents first. And then, of course, you were all encouraged. It was one of those, you had parents that weren't the, hey, stop playing that infernal racket types. They really encouraged you guys. And it wound up that your garage was the place to be for yourselves, obviously, and rockers, and great music just kept coming out of there. This is what I understand, at least. How was that growing up?
Oh, it was amazing. I will say, I said this on my wrap up on my podcast. Detroit and being in my family, in the Quattro family, it was like magic. It was this encapsulated bubble of music because my dad was a big band leader. My mother just held down the fort. You know, she was real straight, but she allowed it all to go on because she wasn't going to stop it. My dad was so passionate. He wanted his kids in music. He absolutely loved it. We all took lessons and played in school. We took piano, we took vocal. There was, you know, sing-alongs in the living room. I mean, always, always the music. And Mickey played with him in a band. They had a booking agency and played all over the Midwest. And Susie even played bongos with my dad's band.
Bongos, that's cool.
7 or 8 years old, I think she was. And he would give her a quarter for playing a gig on the bongos.
Oh, a quarter, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think she should have unionized after that, but again, different story, different. I'm just kidding.
Completely. So we started playing, and you know, the music was bubbling up in Detroit at that time when we started that band. The Beatles had come, the English Invasion was coming, and we just started that band, and we were playing and jamming with all the homeboys, other rock bands that were starting to play music, rock. And that's really when my brother decided to do festivals and book people. He had every homeboy. He did Alice Cooper, Iggy Stooge, MC5, Ted Nugent. He did everybody. And he did us, the Pleasure Seekers. So it became a thriving business, and he brought in the Jimi Hendrix and the Rolling Stones the first time. He was like the Midwest promoter. So we were jamming with the homeboys and honing our craft. And Detroit was like nationalities, little neighborhoods of nationalities, right? So we would get together and jam, and it was like a different feel every time you jam with one of the boys or play a gig with them. They loved having girls that could play. All the musicians did. It was the suits that were hard to get a contract from.
Oh, the suits are annoying. I don't know if the suits know from other people. They kind of live in their own bubbles, and they figure, well, let's see, let's. Their job is to attract the lowest common denominator. To be honest with you, but Detroit rock was a lot of different things. It was a lot of the great movements in several offshoots of rock came out of Detroit. You're talking about the obvious one is Motown.
Yes.
The other obvious one is rock, but you had a lot of alternative rock bands, a lot of girl bands. Punk came out of there. And, I mean, a lot of people know the MC5, obviously. Iggy Pop, great musicians came out of there. Obviously, you and your sisters. There are some great local bands in that area as well that have kind of branched out too. So basically, Detroit was almost the capital of garage rock as well, but its own blend of it, I guess, their own brand, because you kind of blended all the Detroit music together in a way. That's what it seems to me.
It did. You know, there was a paper written, it floored me a few years ago. I read it. Somebody wrote a dissertation on Detroit and what's in the water there. Why is it so magical? And that is the word I use for magical. Not only my family being in this bubble of music, but Detroit was the magic. There was no judgment. There was no competition. Everybody jammed and had a great time learning their chops. Detroit Rock City is like, I mean, think about it. Decades of legacy. Decades. It's like the place. And so much rock came out of Detroit. Yeah, it was magic there.
Did when you guys were jamming, I know Nancy in our interview was talking about how several, let's say, people we know, several well-known people kind of joined you in the garage. Talk about some of those times.
Oh God. Well, our place was the meeting place. When we would do a concert, there were two ballrooms, Grandy Ballroom and Easttown. We played them often with all different, oh God, I have a list of the bands we played with back then. It would take an hour just to say. We played with everybody. And then we traveled all over because we were like early out of Detroit because we were a novelty. Everybody wanted to hire the girl band that could play. So, we had Jefferson Airplane over one time, and it was 3 a.m. in the morning, And my dad, being a musician, you know, he heard us jamming, woke up, came into the door in his boxer shorts and hairless white legs. And he opens the door. And Jack and Yorma were on acid. So they're playing and they go, you know, the shock on their face. They didn't know what was going to happen.
I thought they were in trouble.
Oh, my dad says, "Oh, do you boys know B-flat blues?" And he comes out and joins the jam.
Sweet, sweet. Now I understand he also kind of went on a high-speed chase with Nancy and Ted Nugent. So that's
Oh my God. My dad chased her all through the streets. He never caught her, and she was grounded for a couple of weeks, and he couldn't keep to it because we had gigs. So she got out of it. We had a lot of that. You know, we played. Leslie West was one of my mentors. Jeff Beck and Leslie West, because we had the same management. And after the gigs, we would go to the War Memorial and play hide and seek in this maze of bushes. I mean, what named band goes and plays hide and seek with a bunch of girls? I mean, it's crazy the things we did. And we would have them over for dinner. My mother looked at Leslie and said, "Oh, I didn't make enough pasta," because he was a big guy.
There's never enough pasta. That's what I've known over the years. There's never enough pasta or lasagna, but I guess that kind of fits the same way because there's pasta and lasagna, and hamburgers.
And hamburgers. Yeah.
Patti Quatro Ericson is with me on the Outhouse Lounge. This is where we relax and talk about stuff. I need a new tagline because I really can't say that other word on the air. I don't like to say poop or dung or anything like that, but either way, you know where I'm going.
Go ahead.
You did talk about your mentors. Women, female rockers, again, they didn't have, at least in your era, because you were the mentors in a lot of ways,
yes.
But you didn't have, it seemed to me that there wasn't a lot of room for, let's say, lady mentors in your field at the time. Yeah. There were female-fronted bands, and there were great solo artists that were females beforehand, but hard-rocking all-female bands, not so much.
No, there wasn't. You know, I will say, and this isn't we were very heavy players. And I credit that to the Detroit homeboys that we learned our chops with. It wasn't always that way for the girl bands. A lot of them, you know, they played more girly sounding, that type of thing. And it's not a put down. It's just they were female. They didn't really have somebody to teach them, but that's what they did. They veered toward female group songs and stuff like that. But we learned from the best, our homeboys. I mean, you know, can you imagine jamming with Ted and the Alice Cooper guys and just everybody that we got the ability to jam with and learn with? So I would say we played heavy from the get-go in the style of Detroit, and we tried every type of music. When we went into Cradle, we were trying all kinds of different kinds of music. So we were pretty creative, and I think that was the difference of why we got out and we were booked so heavily. We traveled all over the world. It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. But Detroit was where it started. That's my soul is always there. Foot on the gas, full steam ahead. That was Detroit. You go on the stage, you leave it on the stage, or go the hell home. That's what we grew up with. I remember one gig, Nancy had her machete across the MC's throat.
This sounds cool. I got to hear this one.
Well, Mickey had one, a Halloween show, big festival at Olympia, and they had curfews and everything. And one of the bands didn't show up, so everything got a little bit skewed on that particular show. And the audience, you know, the fans go, and they, you know, pissed and everything. So I was pissed and taking up for my brother because he put on 200 festivals, wonderful ones. Yeah. So I proceeded to tell off the audience before we started our set about, you know, you guys love the festivals. You come to them, you know, get over it. You know, something happened. And Nancy held her machete up. She wouldn't let the MC talk. And we got done, and then we started our set. And everybody was dead quiet in the audience. And they even gave me a hand when I was done telling them off. So,
there you go. So I guess that poor MC was thinking, Oh, I hope I don't have to play that game where somebody says gun to your head or knife to your throat. What would you do in this situation? Well, I guess he now knows.
He now knows. He was stoned. He was always
Oh,
stoned.
there you
We
go.
have him, he starts one of the retro CDs, and we have his introduction. And it's hilarious. You can tell he's stoned all over the place.
Well, you had the pleasure seekers if you're listening, you're not seeing this picture. I'll try to find a way. I'll put some links to the Quattro's website, but you'll see that picture there. There's if you're watching this on any of our video outlets, you'll see the picture of the pleasure seekers. You have the marketing good. You've got the matching outfits in some of these shots. You have the fact that you're an all female rock band. You play well. That's great on stage, and that's great amongst your peers. But like you said earlier in the interview, it's the business. The Suits did not really take to an all-female band. I'm thinking, why didn't the Suits want something new, especially in an era where something new was actually an instant hit almost?
Well, they did want it, but it was like they wanted you to be the girls. They had them in their heads like, Donna Reed, tinkly little tunes in Vegas,
Oh,
like a showgirl. It was so ridiculous. But I will say, when we were, at 14 and 16, we had our first single out. And then shortly after that, we signed with Mercury. From this picture that you're showing, that was at Trudy Heller's Trick in New York City. Big, important spot. And they came, ABC booking agency signed us. And the president decided to handle us by himself. He handled only Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, and the Pleasure Seekers. And he was like he was the booking agency in the US at that time. And a lot of it was mob based too. We had some run-ins with the mob, I'll tell you about. But
okay.
then Mercury came to the same gig and signed us. And again, it was staff writers. They wanted their people working, writing songs. So that's what happened. They didn't necessarily want us to write,
It's
And
a
that's
machine
how
sometimes,
their
right?
system was. It was stupid. Yeah.
Well, it's
Stupid.
funny because we talk about music being sort of a machine. Everybody's packaged. This isn't new. They've tried to pull this stuff on musicians back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as well. And
Yeah.
I imagine even in the jazz eras,
Oh yeah. Yeah. They wanted it their way or the highway, and you had to just go along and get along. We ended up leaving Mercury because we wanted to start writing, and we were on this huge Northwest tour with Pat O'Day, and we were on tour with Eric Burden. He held us over for the entire summer to go on tour. He adored us. He said, "You got to get off Mercury. You got to do, record some of those things you've written." So we did. We left Mercury after those 3 singles that we did, and they were regional hits. And then that was it. We started writing and changed into Cradle a little bit later.
I can't really let you go with this. You mentioned you had some trouble with the mob, so I need to hear some of this. All right. I'm going to sit back and let you tell a story or two.
Oh my God. We were in New Jersey, a booking thing from ABC, and these mob punk guys came into the club where we were playing, and we were behind the bar playing. It was all set up, the equipment. And they started doing their flirting and all that stuff and wanting to get with us. And my sister, Arlene's husband, Leo, was our manager. And he said, you're going to have to play along, pretend like you're going to come back. You're going to go back to the hotel and freshen up, and you'll come back and party. We had to do a whole number to get out of there. He said, just go. Don't wait for me. Take the car, go to the hotel. So we come back the next day. The owner was in the hospital, beaten up, because we never went back. And they had cleaved the bar in half. They had destroyed the entire bar, these punks. And Leo, our manager, calls Joe Glazier, the manager of ABC, the head guy. He said, "Where the hell did you put us?" And he was so freaked out. And he heard the whole story. He called back Leo about an hour later and said, "Don't worry, those guys will never bother anybody again."
Oh, boy.
He had him offed. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess they kind of disappeared a little afterwards. You can't keep cleaving up people's bars or things like that. What happened to the good old days where the mob knew to keep things in line and everything, and keep weirdos like that away from actual people, unless it was absolutely necessary. Oh, boy.
Yep. That was a gig. Oh my God. And Susie had a boyfriend, not a boyfriend, a guy that was crazy over her, and he was a mob guy. And he was like protecting us every time we'd come to New York City. He lived with his mother, and he's in the mob. I mean,
you know what? We love our moms, okay? That's the whole thing. We're Italian. That's what we do.
a lot of it in Detroit too. Yeah, I mean, crazy. Oh my God. And we had another one when we were in New York City. Oh my God, there's so many stories. I could go on for hours. We were in New York City doing a recording at a studio, and we were playing "Keep Me Hanging On," right? The Vanilla Fudge song.
Right.
Lights off for atmosphere and everything. And all of a sudden the lights go on, and there's the Vanilla Fudge. And they're like, huh? With their mouths open. They didn't know it was girls. So we all go back to the Hotel Gorham to party. It was the band hotel. In residence was The Who, Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, what's their name? Blues Magoos.
Oh, yes.
Ziggy Marley's band. So
funny note. I'll give you that in a minute. I got a funny note about a fun fact about the Blues Magoos, but I'll get that in a few moments.
Yeah, well, our drummer was dating one of them, so we were close with them. We used to go and hear them in Detroit all the time. They were very popular there and very psychedelic, and we learned a lot from them too. We would hang out with them every time they came to Detroit. But at this hotel on this particular night, one of them decided to set off an aerial bomb off our window, our hotel window. I mean, we're all partying down, right? And the whole hotel smells of reefer. And I mean, crazy. 5 Catholic girls, we partied, but we were pretty straight otherwise. But these guys were all doing their stuff. And he sets out an aerial bomb into this truss, the building going up next door. And it's just the framework, 13 stories or something. And what happens? All of a sudden, it blows up and the whole sky lights up. This was the night of Martin Luther King's death.
Oh, boy.
15 cop cars at the hotel. Keith nailed his furniture to the ceiling in his room. The sprinklers were going off. It was just mayhem. And our manager threw us in the bed. Pretend you're asleep. Just lay down. And they come to our door, and we're sitting there. Oh, what's going on? Like we're asleep, right? And all the bands took them down to the station. Of course, they got out on bail, etc. And they never figured out who actually set off the bomb. But the next morning, right, everybody's checking out and going to their gigs. The Who's bus was in the front. Keith Moon says, oh, I forgot something. And he goes upstairs, right?
Okay.
All of a sudden, a TV comes crashing down to the floor. And he walks back down and says, okay, we can go now.
What a guy. At least he knew to clean up the place before he left, right?
Oh, my God. He was a loon. He was a loon.
The fun fact about Balance was Patti Castro, the lead singer, as you know. He was the 1965. The Blues Magoos technically had that big hit. The you ain't seen nothing yet. It was a big hit. They're considered a one-hit wonder. I mean, again, it's a loose definition because one-hit wonders are considered those top 40s, and they always mess those up anyway because the people with multiple hits are called one-hit wonders. But again, they're considered a one-hit wonder. He also led a bunch of bands, and then around the late 70s, early 80s, he led Balance, which actually had one hit called Breaking Away. Great song, by the way. And technically, Patti Castro was a one-hit wonder twice.
Oh, my God.
How about that? But he's a fantastic musician. I remember he actually had a place in Warwick. He had a restaurant in Warwick, New York, at my first radio station. So we had him in to do some of the morning shows with us every once in a while. He was a really, really cool guy.
That term always surprises me anyway.
Hated it.
Because one-hit wonders. I mean, if you go back to that era, okay, and you look at all the popular bands, the English Invasions and all that, a lot of those bands had 1 or 2 hits. That was it.
Right.
It was the days of doing albums. You had to fill up an entire album. And a lot of them, when I look back and I listen to the tunes, it's like a lot of it was just album fluff, with a lot of bands. And they just had one or two hits and that was it. But they got famous on it. They're revered even to this day, all those bands. And I mean, I won't even name names, but there's a lot of them that only had one or two hits.
Oh, I know. And some of this stuff is really good. The deeper album cuts, some of them, like you said, they're kind of fluff, but some are really good. I was listening. The Honeycombs is a band like that. Again, one of the first bands with just the female drummer, Honey Lantry, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Yep. They had that song "Have I the Right." You start listening a little more. And a lot of the songs are available on YouTube. They're very good. They're not hit right. They're not written as for hits or as hits, but the music was very, very good. And it's just something you wouldn't hear on pop radio at the time, I guess.
Well, it was such a machinery, like you said a while ago. You got your label. They put out the ones they wanted to pick to put out and all that. And it was just a machinery thing. I mean, I experienced that when I moved to LA, because in Detroit it was Magic and in LA it was Malice, claw your way to the top, get on the label, do what they want. And I mean, it's crazy the differences through history, how that worked. And a lot of bands were so talented, a lot of them that never got a leg up. Maybe they didn't get done and get signed. It's crazy how it happens. There's so much in the pot, the management, the PR, the label, the money spent, how hungry the band is, how good they write. It's all part of it,
But when you were starting out, again, we talk about the suits and everything, how they didn't always take to an all-female band. You still had Bertha, Fanny, and some others coming down the pike and everything. Did you female bands, I can't say all lady bands, or I'm not sure what the kind term would be right now, because I'm just joking. I'll just say it anyway. All chick bands. All right, no, I'm joking with you. Can I say broad? I won't say that. All female bands. I'm just kidding here. But did you feel like you had to kind of stick together, or was there a lot more competition between the female bands than one might have guessed?
We never had competition with the other bands because we felt, this isn't out of ego, but we felt we were the best. We learned in Detroit, learned our chops. We played heavier than most of them. And we were writing by the time we got to Cradle. And we were, like I say, the men really respected us. They loved jamming with us. I remember jamming with Robert Plant and Jimmy backstage on Stairway to Heaven, and then jamming at their hotel some more, and so many jams. And they respected us. That's all I can say. Jeff Beck, my mentor, he taught me so much. He was so amazing. And he loved playing with women. I mean, look, he had a girl bass player in his band. He worked with Susie a lot. He thought it was so cool. There was no gender bias with the musicians or the other girls. We all got along. We traded lineups if I needed. I stole Darlene from another group in Detroit. I stole a lead guitarist from another group before I started lead. And they found someone else. There weren't that many girls around playing, but somehow we all just supported each other and it worked out. There wasn't a lot of competition. Nowadays, it's so very different. I mean, do you know a Grammy-winning all-girl band? Is there one ever? Ever?
The funny thing is, you and I talked about this off air before we did any interview. You flabbergasted me. I thought there had to have been at least one all-female band which won a Grammy Award. Now, Again, I have my opinion about the Grammys anyway. Yeah, that's a different story for a different day. You'd think with all the great bands out there, I'm even surprised the Bangles didn't get one.
No, they didn't. And they got further than some of them because they went very pop mainstream. You have that hit pop mainstream. We didn't do that. We played in a heavier vein, more heavy rock, bordering on metal, not metal of today, but rock metal, very heavy. And I mean, they went mainstream, they got their hits, so they got known, so did the Go-Go's and all that. But
Hey, they did a video with Leonard Nimoy. I mean, come on, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
but look at today. You know,
Yeah.
your most amazing girls playing Nita Strauss, Lizzie Hale, and Sophia. There's another gal, Jennifer Batten, who played with Michael Jackson. Think about it. They
Yeah.
all played with male bands. One girl in the male band. That's how it's always been. You know, let's take them out. Even when Susie went to England, Mickey put her with a male band.
Hmm.
You know, they didn't think that, you know, the girls would get pregnant, they wouldn't make it, whatever. They all had their reasoning, but that's how it is. Even today, they put them with a male band. And there are 2 female bands that are kicking ass right now, really carrying on the flame. The Warning, you go listen to them.
Okay.
3-piece. They're fantastic. And Plush, another one. I mean, you know, they're all over. When you go online, you could find a million girls taking over the scene now that play, and they put their little tapes up and stuff, and you think, my God, is she talented? Why isn't she in some big band or, you know? There they are online. You can find them everywhere.
Yeah, a Plush, and of course, when it comes to all female bands, there are plenty that have been around for a very long time, which I liked a lot as well. And one of them is obviously Shonen Knife, which a band I've always loved, and they've been around since the '80s. They were huge in the '90s, and they're still playing. They're still putting albums out and touring around the world. So yeah, but again, 3-piece band. I am just very surprised you had not one. What are the odds? Basically, that's what I can ask. What are the odds?
Well, I'm not surprised because music now is so oversaturated. The females have exploded. I mean, they have really taken over the scene. They're all over playing in girl bands or with male bands, and they're known and they're talented. And you listen to them and you think, man, they play as good as any guy. There's no gender thing going on. You know, they don't even buy into that. We had to deal with it back in the 60s. We had to. Plush. The girl on the right, she with the dark hair, she was the lead singer. She won one of those contests. I don't know if it was American Idol or the other one with the chairs that turn, but she won it. And she, you know, she got her band going. They're fantastic. They're fantastic. She sings her ass off. So, you know, they're there. They're all over. They've been there since the beginning of time. It just was before its time when it was a men's club. It was different in the 60s and 70s, not because of the musicians, because of the labels.
Yeah, the labels. Now, yeah, the labels did kind of not do a lot of these bands justice, especially back in the beginning here. I'm not sure if they get. I guess they wanted to pigeonhole women into some sort of the. Again, this is from an observer. I wasn't even born during the mid '60s. I was born in '69, so I grew up watching the Go-Go's, Josie Cotton. I was around when I was a teen when the Bangles were huge. So I'm here thinking, oh, all female bands, that's a normal thing. It was already normalized. But without, again, not realizing that even as many as 10 years ago, there wasn't a Runaways up until the mid '70s. There wasn't and if it wasn't for the Pleasure Seekers and and Cradle and of course Fanny, Bertha, and all of you, there wouldn't be a girls' school. There wouldn't be any of these female bands getting there. And still, funny thing, no matter what kind of great music you put out, I'm again, Grammys I think are a little political at times. But I'm just surprised at this point now, even with during the PC eras, all female bands haven't gotten their an all female band hasn't won one yet.
Well, look at the Grammys and the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's all such a joke. It's all political. We know that. Okay,
that's true.
I mean, there's so few women in the Hall of Fame, you know, that of the musician type. And I mean, Susie should have been in a long time ago.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it wasn't pure influence. Yeah.
But, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, she's even sick of it. You know, she doesn't even want to hear about it anymore. And the same with the Grammys. I mean, they do what they do. Look at what Rat came in and that Jan, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right, Jan Winter, you know, he's gone now, but he was so prejudiced. He latched onto the rap and all of a sudden rock was dead.
Yeah, yeah.
Rock was dead. It was ridiculous in the Hall of Fame. And in the Grammys, that got affected. All the rap stuff came in with these big productions and the dancers, and the whole scene changed. How many rock groups do you see getting Grammys now? Think about it.
Oh, there are fake rock groups getting Grammys now. Again, I don't want to disparage anybody, and they're probably very good musicians, but the style of music, the rock of today is very soft and very, let's just say, there were certain things cut off.
Pop.
Okay,
Pop,
and
pop
there
rock.
we go. Yeah, pop rock, if you will. Yeah,
I mean, your biggest stars, that's what kind of music it is. It's much more mild. My husband goes crazy listening to it. I mean, the stuff we did way back, I mean, that's why classical rock has survived. People
that's true.
miss it. They miss it.
And that's another thing. You guys, the all female bands, Pleasure Seekers, Cradle, and yes, Fanny. And I want to get into the fact that you were in Fanny. I want to get there as well. But you did have something called FM radio, which was a great way at the time because it wasn't what it is today. FM radio is the pop radio of today.
Yes.
But yesterday it was the experimental radio. It was where it was an unknown quantity, and AM was I'll say AM was king, I suppose, if you want to really put it that way. But FM was where you could put the longer music on. You didn't have to put 3 minute to 2.5 minute songs, and you could put 4 or 5 minute songs, long instrumentals. They had bands that sound great and had excellent sound, but they weren't really as well known up until they were played a little more often on these FM stations. It was a new thing. And how did your bands, the musicians you were involved with, kind of take advantage of that?
Oh, we did. I'll tell you, it's interesting. In Detroit, we had Mark Parento, and he was on FM. And he was one of the earliest, and he was in with all the labels and all the people trying to make it. When we were on Casablanca with Kiss, right? I mean, some of these stories are so funny. They had to go to Detroit, and Mark would play them, and Casablanca was ready to drop them because they hadn't broken through with their makeup and the whole thing, right? And Mark played them on FM. He got them going, and they were told, you either break this album in Detroit or that's it. And they did. Detroit helped them break their album. The same thing happened with The Who on one of their albums. I used to date Roger. So,
wait. That sounds like a bevy of good stories in there. Let's just not gloss over these things here.
No. I'm in his book. He called me and said, "Can I put your name in?" He thought a lot of me and my playing. He was a sweetheart. Roger's a dear. He's a dear. Anyway, we hung a lot. And anyway, Kiss had to make, The Who had to break one of their albums in Detroit too. I mean, it just went on and on. Mark kept pushing the FM stuff. It's where we got played sometimes, and he helped develop that. Mark Parento from Detroit, of course, Detroit. There you go. Excellent. And FM was real important. It was the only place you could get played with the stuff more creatively that you were writing, that was heavier vein.
Here's my theory about music and rock over the years. In the 1950s, the mid-50s, when rock first was played on the radio, it was willy-nilly. You had some great songs, your rockabilly, your kind of rock offshoots, pop rock and things like that, but it was all over the map. Then the industry kind of yanked it up, wrapped up in a nice little ball between 59 and 62. And again, I'm not saying the musicians were good, the singers were good. It just seemed to be, and again, looking through history, I want to see, you can correct me on this as I go along here, wrapped up into a little ball. 1963, the Beatles come in. All hell breaks loose. So you had the British invasion and the local American sound invasion. So you had your LA sound, your New York sound, your mid Jersey sound, your Detroit sound, your mid Texas garage band sound. All that kind of came to a head, and rock, and then FM radio opened up and had all of your types of bands. These musicians who were much different from the 2-minute song pop rockers at the time. People were more exposed to this music. So the 70s come along. Yeah, it got milder, but then you had groups from all over the world coming in. You had the glam rock, you had the The metal was developing. Then you had more female artists getting out there, but there were different types of music. Late 70s, early 80s, the industry tried to wrap it up into a neat little ball. Then punk and new wave come out, and they take that. You have your blues rock bands of those eras and everything, and they sprung out. Then 87, 80, 88, 89, the industry took it back because MTV kind of let everything go loose, and things that wouldn't have been on the radio at the time were watched on MTV because, hey, they're the ones putting out the videos. So late 80s, they kind of package up the music. The 90s is still your hard rock, but everything kind of softened up after the turn of the century. Am I far off here, or am I not?
I will give you my encapsulation, which I stand by, and I have for years. For me, leaving out the 50s into that little window there to 62 or so, but from the 64 when all the way through turn of the century, okay, what we lived was what I call a Renaissance era of music. You had, like you said, you had British invasion colliding with the Southern rock, colliding with acid rock, with punk, with New York, with all of it in internet, going international, all of it coming out into the public stream. It was a renaissance. There was so much creativity going on. And that's what I miss in some ways. There are certain bands I love today. We'll get into that I think are fantastic. But that was a Renaissance era. And then along came at one point in the late 60s, MC5. To me, they laid out a teenage call to arms. Kick out the jams, motherfuckers. And every teenager heard that. It just opened it up more. So Renaissance. It was a Renaissance era until the turn of the century when everything started changing.
The advent of auto-tune kind of hurt music a lot too, because then you realize, hey, now you don't have to have the best talent. And if you do, we're still going to package you up into a little ball and dress you up nice, and you're just a pretty packaged pop star. And even the rock bands are like that. Not mentioning any by name, but they go on there, they play their soft rock, they mouth whatever political tone that they think will get them popular, and that's it. They become hit factories, if you will.
And they can auto tune everything.
Yeah, it's awful.
Anybody can make a song now. Oh geez. Like I said, in Detroit, you left it on the stage legitimately or go the hell home. It was the hardest audience you'd ever play. And that's how me and my sisters grew up. That's what we grew up in. So it's no wonder we have a hide like an alligator. We persevered and just kept moving along.
Well, Patti, you're actually the curator of the music of your sisters, and yes. Obviously the Pleasure Seekers, Cradle, and anything you've kind of done individually here and there. You and all your sisters stayed in the business one way or another here and there, and there's a lot of really interesting music you put out. And again, you've also worked with Fanny. I'm sure you have a lot of stories coming out of there. But I want to just mention that people can get the Pleasure Seekers and Cradle music, and soon, from understanding, there will be some Fanny music out, or more Fanny music out and available for people as well. Am I correct here?
Yes, we have the retro music of Cradle and Pleasure Seekers are on Sundays. They're also, all the tunes are also on my YouTube channels. I've opened up 2 new channels, Fanny Official and Quatro Rock. And Quatro Rock is going to be a very huge legacy one because we're putting on Mickey's stuff. He had 9 albums. It's a family channel, And so it has Pleasure Seekers Cradle. It's going to have Susie's stuff. It's going to have stuff I did individually. So that's just exploding. It's going very well. And I keep populating more and more. And that's the stuff that's on Sundays. And then on Fanny, that's coming out. We've remixed that album. And it's going to be out new, updated a little for the album on Casablanca Records. So that's coming out, and a fanzine. And for the first time, our rock opera that we made in Fanny. It's never been heard before. So that's going to be a double set. It's going to be on Cherry Red. We're in the process right now. So that's all going to be available soon on Cherry Red, probably in the new year because it takes time to do it all. But that'll be some new and remixed of the Casablanca album, which had the biggest hit we ever had, which was about David Bowie, Butterboy. It was banned in Boston because it was too sexual back in ¡74.
Oh boy. Well, how sexual was it if it's too sexual back then? It couldn't be that bad, right? I mean, considering Prince had some stuff that was in the next couple of years.
It was ridiculous, but they deemed it too sexual in '74. And I mean, David Bowie had a hand in our costuming in Fanny. So, you know, he was around a lot. He loved the band, Fanny.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was a picture you sent to me. He had a nice quote about you guys, but he really respected, from what I'm saying, he's really respected Fanny. And that's a great thing, too. It's good to have a guy like him on your side.
Oh, God, he was great. And he was so gracious. He always said, we would talk music backstage. And I never forget, he said, always make an entrance. You know, that was his advice to us. And that picture I sent you, the one with the flowing where it's a body shot, that was the costume he helped design.
Wow. Fantastic. I believe the quote was, one of the most important female bands in American rock has been buried without a trace. And that's Fanny. So he was really, he wanted you guys to have more exposure as well. That's a good thing. It's good to have a lot of good people on your side, especially in a tough industry and any industry. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Leslie West wrote the intro on our CDs, on the retro ones. He said they played better than most of the guys we played with, you know. And Dennis Thompson from the MC5, he was like, oh my God, they kicked ass. You know, I mean, the musicians loved it. They always loved it.
What made you go in that heavier direction with Cradle, by the way? I need to ask.
What made us go in that direction?
Yeah, what inspired you to go that way? You went a lot harder with Cradle.
Yes, it was obvious. We had been, in Pleasure Seekers, we did the entire Beatles Sgt. Pepper album, and we did the entire Magical Mystery album, and we did an entire Motown review. And we used to change instruments, move around and everything. It was a big thing. We had a showgirl. Our drummer's grandmother was a showgirl in UK. She made our costumes. We had very unusual costumes. You showed one with the black sequin, but we had one where it had a hole around the breasts and the pelvic area. And it was a black jumpsuit, but the gold spotlighted this hole. I mean, we were pretty daring. And we would go to Paraphernalia in New York City and get the crocheted stuff, you know, that you could see through with a body stocking on. My dad would say, oh my God, you look like whores. You know, he couldn't stand it, but we were totally covered. We had a body stocking on. But we had the most amazing costumes. And it was, Nancy called it a show band. It wasn't a show band. We did a lot of covers, but we also wrote. Okay. So it was like a mix. And we did our own take on a lot of the covers. And then we were touring all over, Far East, everywhere. And we came back home and we played a festival and there was another girl band. And they
two in the same place? Wait a minute. Was that allowed back then?
More than one. And they played in a heavier vein. And we were like, oh my God, we got to play catch up here. You know, they're doing their originals. So we immediately, it was pretty quick. We decided to change. Susie went on drums, believe it or not.
Oh.
We fired our drummer. Our older sister left. Nancy was in and me. And then that didn't work out. We hired, at the end of Cradle, we had Jerry Nolan playing drums from the New York Dolls. Do you remember him?
Yeah. But then it can't be an all-female band. But it was at least run.
No, that was the last gasp. It was right before Susie went to England. Okay, her and Nancy went to New York, and they grabbed Jerry and brought him back, and he was going to be our drummer. But back to the transition, we decided to change at one point. And we had us right here in the picture, Nancy, me and Susie, and Nancy Rogers. And we started writing like a fiend. We had already been writing in the Pleasure Seekers, but this was like, okay, now we're going to do it. And we had a 2-singer punch. We had Susie doing more Joplin-esque type songs, and Nancy wailed like Robert Plant. She could really sing. So, and she'd strut all over the stage with her machete, and she played timpani and violin, and Rogers played kettle drums and double bass drum, and Susie was all over. And they would trade on organ sometimes. So we just started writing like crazy, and it was a whole different band. Our saying was the Cradle that rules the, what was it? Rocks the world.
There you go.
Yeah, rocks the world, the Cradle. So very popular, very popular. That was the band Leslie West loved, and all the other bands we played with. It was a very heavy band. And if you listen to the channel, it's all on there. There's some really cool songs on there. One we wrote about Iggy Stooge, who was going with our drummer in the Pleasure Seekers. And we wrote one about his shtick on stage and how he would play the crowd. And he was really the early mosh pit type guy. He was all over and crazy.
They love a good mosh pit. They got to bring those back. But I guess the kids are too sensitive for that too.
Oh, he was crazy. But we did a song on him. It's on the YouTube channel. It features him in some of the pictures. And we wrote one about Ted Nugent. Ted has these jungle drums going on. It's just, there's some really fun music. Yeah. We did a lot of work. So it went heavy into that. And we just started touring all over. And oh my God, we must have played the Midwest for years. They kept bringing us back, touring the entire Midwest.
Patti, the torch has been carried though, and you guys passed it to the likes of the Runaways, and then you had obviously the New Wavers, the Go-Go's, the Bangles, and there are a lot of other great all-female metal bands. The Girls' School was one of mine, by the way, from the 80s. You had some good all-female bands in the 90s. Let's look at today, because again, we thought rock is kind of again, as you know, rock has kind of fallen back a little bit as far as the industry is concerned, but there are still some good rock bands out there, new rock bands. There's still some good hard rock bands out there, and many of them are either led by females or consisting of all females. So talk about some of the people that are kind of, or the bands that you're watching today. I know you talked about Plush. Let's talk about maybe some other ones that you seem to like, you like these days, and you and kind of hopefully will inspire young female rockers in the future.
My favorite is Warning and Plush. Those are the two that I watch. I love watching what Jennifer does, Jennifer Batten. She does solo stuff a lot. And Nita, I mean, she's at the top of her game. If you listen to Nita Strauss, there isn't a guy that she doesn't play as good as. I mean, she's as good as Eddie Van Halen. I mean, she's fantastic. She does everything he does, and she should be like huge, but she doesn't sing, so she isn't in a band. That's Nita. I just saw her. Alice played Austin 2 weeks ago, and we blabbed because I'm friends with her and Nita and Lizzie Hale. And Lizzie Hale and I had the same upbringing in a musical family, so we did some interviewing together. And she's a doll. She is fantastically talented. She's got the voice. Lizzie's fantastic. And she does a lot of solo stuff. She goes off and works with other bands, which is really cool, besides Hailstorm. So I love Hailstorm. I love everything Nita does. There's a lot of girls playing, like I said, online that I don't necessarily know their names. You know how algorithms work. And they just flash on the screen, and I'll listen. I'll say, oh my God, she should be in a band. There's so many of them, but those are the ones that are pretty well known. And I have my male favorites too. I love Shinedown. Love Shinedown. I think they're fantastic. And I love Alice in Chains, the stuff they did, a few years ago. I think one of the guys passed away, the lead singer. I mean, I have my favorites, contemporaries. There's some really good ones. I mean, a lot. I like all kinds of music. Okay.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a good thing, because we can't live in a music tunnel.
No, No. And there's so many good ones. Nancy's son's band was incredible. They didn't make it. They didn't break through. You know, it ended, but they were really good. I used to go up in Dallas and hear them. And my God, the Pantera drummer was one of his mentors, her son, Michael. He's a great drummer. Yeah,
I was like watching the kids of the great musicians that I know watch them play. In fact, Sherry Curry's son, Jake Hayes, is a fantastic musician. George Harrison's son has had a number of bands. My favorite name, here's my favorite band name, New Number 2.
Oh,
inspired by the great show The Prisoner. So
that's great. But, you know, there's so many good musicians out there. It's almost oversaturated. There's so much that it's, with the industry the way it is now. Susie said something to me recently where we're talking on Zoom. She said, Patty, we're at the bottom of the food chain. We're the bottom of the food chain with the record companies now, what they can do. She cracked me up, but she said, that's how it is nowadays, you know. And she's right. It's just oversaturated. It's a whole different thing with the streaming and everything. I mean, you know, what are you going to do if you're a musician? It's hard.
Yeah. So forget about those. Forget about those industry suits. You guys can kind of skip those sometimes nowadays too, and people, dedicated fans, can buy new music directly on from the internet. They can download music and do that now, as long as nobody steals anything, and it's another issue. But I remember Susie came out with a nice Christmas song a couple of years ago, a few years ago. One of my last years doing Revenge of the 80s radio, I had her on to talk about that. It was a beautiful song. So the great musicians are still putting out great music.
And they're doing it themselves a lot of times and bypassing the label. Good for them. You know, I think it's wonderful. I mean, that's what I did with the Pleasure Seekers and Cradle. I put it out. We produced it myself. That stuff was from a two-track machine. Two-track machine on New Year's Eve with the MC5 at the Grandy Ballroom. And it survived. And my friend, who was an engineer, he cleaned it up a little, you know, from any noise and stuff. And it actually became the 2 CDs. And people love it. I mean, how blessed was that I kept the tapes? They were in a closet for years. And now we're redoing the Fanny one. That Don Kirshner thing, I don't know if you saw it on the Fanny YouTube. What a blessing. They don't let go of those archives. Nobody lets go of that shit. Don Kirshner owns that stuff, and they gave it to me for free.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice of them.
Yes, and you can post it. So it's up that you can actually see what we did in 1974. It's a whole show. Yeah. So, you know, there's ways to get around it, and sometimes they're kind to the artist, but it is tough now. And I'm glad to see people doing their own stuff and putting it out. I love it because you can do it now. You can do it.
And that's a good thing. For our listeners and viewers, where can they pick up or listen to some more Pleasure Seekers, Cradle, and Fanny?
The YouTube channels, and also there is, the big thing is our continuing podcast. It's called rockandrollsurvivors.com or podcast, Rock and Roll Survivors podcast. And it is going through the entire legacy from the early days all the way through the Pleasure Seekers Cradle. All the music will be in it. It goes through the whole family story. My dad, Mickey, with Lauren Swelk, Susie, me, you know, the bands, and into Fanny, because we had three groundbreaking female bands is what I was involved in. So and we're opening the tent. I am not interested in saying, oh, me. Not at all. I recognize so many women were doing the same thing we were. And my mission on this podcast is to open up that tent and expose people to all the great musicians that maybe didn't get a leg up. You know, they didn't have a chance. So we're going through the whole dang thing. My podcaster, Kristen, she's a historian. She's moving to Detroit, and it's going to be turned into a documentary. So we're doing this whole thing, and it drops every Thursday. That's my wrap-ups. I did 3 wrap-ups on, it was pretty daring of me, I will say, because the Fanny girls all have their oral histories out, right? And you know, I spoke about Magic to Malice.
Right.
Because I've been through a lot. Magic in Detroit, my whole time there, and I joined Fanny, and there was Malice with the way.
Don't forget narrowly escaping a weird mafia tirade or something like that.
Yeah, I mean with other women. Okay.
I know.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Because there were so many things that were not as nice to go through, you know, when you're in a band, and we're covering all of it because I finally am doing my oral history as well. There's a lot to cover. And I always stay in the light, Chris. I stay in the light. You know, people do things because they're hungry. They want to make it. They want to stay relevant. And they don't always exhibit the best behavior. And that's sad to me. I mean, one of the original girls in Fanny got like completely left out of the story. So I some light on her. Oh, she was the one they signed on Reprise. It was her band, not Fanny. They changed the band after she left because she was getting screwed on royalties. She said, I'm not doing this. I wrote the songs, and she left. And they had to change the contract and become Fanny. And she was the lead guitarist and the lead singer. And she was terrific. She had a blues career. She played with Muddy Waters, all kinds of famous blues artists. And she got completely left out. And it irked me. That's what I hate. I hate to see that. You know, everybody deserves their light shine on them for what they do, and it's good stuff. And that's what we do on the podcast.
Well, I'd like to see this podcast stay available in 150 years from now, when you take the people that would otherwise be lost in music history, you bring them up and you say, hey, this is what they did. This is how they did it. And believe me, I'm sure people 100 years from now want to hear some real music anyway. At the rate the industry is going, the kids are going to want to hear something real, and this is going to be very inspiring for them.
Absolutely, and it's in my podcaster, Dr. Kristen. She keeps feet to the fire. She wants facts, not revisionist history.
Cool.
Facts, how the music went, etc. And yes, it's extremely important, and we are continuing onward, and it's been already picked up by several different podcasters because it's getting real popular, and it's on every platform too already. So yeah, we're doing it, and we're having a great time doing it, and hopefully it does provide a true factual history of a lot of good music.
That's the Rock and Roll Survivors podcast with my guest, and she's the host, Patti Quatro Ericson. And Patti, it's an honor to have you on here. I'm very happy we got to talk, and we hope you can come to the lounge and do some cool future programs with us. There we go.
Sure.
Maybe talk about some more of this maybe we do a Fanny focus show, and maybe talk about another one. I want to bring the ladies of rock back and talk about other stories that you guys had, some of the bad things that happened, how you got through it, you know?
Oh, God. A lot of drama, a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Patti Quatro Ericson, once again, check it all out. The Rock and Roll Survivors podcast, Quattro Rock, Fanny's Archives, and everything else. Thank you again for being with us on the lounge, and thank you for joining us right here.
Thank you.
The Outhouse Lounge.
Wonderful. Thank you.